Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. Finally made our way back here. Good morning, Kristen. How are you? Hope you're doing well. Great to see you this morning. Good morning, Yvette. Hello, hello. Glad you're here. Hi, Donna. Good morning. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well this morning. There's some goodness in it for you. Hey, Karen. Good morning. Hope it's a good one. It is beautiful out there. At least it is here in the city. It is warm. It's pushing 50 and it's sunny out. It's amazing. I'm going to try and get out for a little bit of a walk today. So, oh, that's nice. I'm glad you're going to see your mom. That's really lovely. Hope. Sorry to hear that the family was hurting there, and peace and grace to you all. Hey, Jamie. Good morning. Hello, hello. Great to see you here. Hope you're doing all right. Good morning, everybody. It is a beautiful day in the city. Glad you're all here and being a part of this journey. Back for another week. All right, let's get going. It is the 27th day of February. We're almost done with February. We are 2 months into this year, friends. It is the 27th day of February this Tuesday, and we are back this week for another 11:11. I'm glad you're with us, glad you're a part of it, and I hope that this moment finds you well and knowing all of God's blessings. There is there's probably few lines in Bible that more theological thought has been put into than this line I want to talk about today, which is this which it comes from Genesis. It's the first chapter of Genesis, so it's right out of the beginning of the book. But it is, and it's this. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our own image, in our likeness, so that we may rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the air, over the livestock and the wild animals, over all the creatures that move along the ground. Let us make humanity in our image,' says God." This notion that we are made in the image of God, that Martin Luther spends a lot of time in this, believing that our true and perfect selves are really our true and perfect selves in God's image. It's the pattern for our perfect selves, and which is not to necessarily say we are going to be as God is, but in a way that we are going to be perfected as God is perfect. That squirrely little line from John, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And perfect doesn't mean we get all the things right. It doesn't mean we have all the answers. We win at Jeopardy. Perfect is about form. It means we're formed in such a way so that these things that are within us and these things that we do and the expression that we give to them actually have God's imprint on them. That is God's pattern on them. And that the best of us, and when I say not the best of us, meaning like other people who are better than we are, I'm talking about the best parts of us, are actually, I think, sometimes the parts that we end up hiding, or the parts that we end up thinking we have to tamp down in order to survive the brokenness of the world. I mean, here in Fall River's a fun town. I've been here almost 6 years now, and it is in one way it's a really friendly town. You walk around Fall River, you will make a friend. Like you'll encounter people, and you can say hi to people on the street. They'll say hi back to you. You go. I'll go for a walk today, probably down to the waterfront. I'll go down to Memorial Park, and I almost always say hi to people when I walk. Almost everybody who's on a walk down there will say hi back. It's actually a pretty, like, if you go out for a meal, people will engage you. There's a there it's actually it's really, and yet at the same time this is a town with an edge. It's a town with real crime in it. It's a town with people who often will be jaded. Their hearts will be jaded. There's the schemersons out there who are trying to figure out how to get over on you or something like that, or to steal your parking spot or what. I mean, all the shenanigans that go on in being in town. There's always shenanigans. And that environment, and I'm not just saying it's Fall River, this is everywhere, friends. This is everywhere. Everybody will think, wherever we are, often that to be kind, to be generous, to be helpful is to be, well, a sucker. When Albert Schweitzer, the great medical missionary doctor who would go on to live out his faith, was a boy, he was invited to go hunting. So he and a bunch of other boys, a bunch of teenagers, they got their shotguns out and they went out to beat the to kind of beat the bushes and go pigeon hunting. And they were gonna kind of have a big fish, have a big bird bake there at the end of the day or whatever. And but this Schweitzer was just horrified by this. He liked the birds, and he was actually an incredibly tender-hearted guy. Like he actually really wanted to know the beauty of and he loved the bird song. He actually would talk about that, and so just before, as they were getting ready to go out on the hunt, the church bell started to ring in the distant town. And it gave him an idea. And just as they were creeping up on and ready to flush the birds out and shoot them all, Schweitzer began making noise and began clapping, and the birds all flew away. Now, if you know anything about teenage boys, and you know anything about how teenage boys are, and you know anything about how teenage boys are to weakness, and in the face of that sort of weakness, of not wanting to kill the birds because he took an incredible amount of mocking for that. He took an incredible amount of kind of being socially brutalized by his peers because of that. They made fun of him. He was considered weak. But I want you to remember and consider, for a teenage boy, actually how much courage that took. He knew what would happen should he scare the birds that he didn't want to shoot. Should he not just go along to get along with a bunch of other kids. And it would come to him much later in life when he would receive his call to go out into the medical missions. You see, he bore witness to the suffering in Africa. And he had at that point become a quite famous doctor. I mean, he was established in a great community with a great practice. He made great money. He lived a comfortable and good life, healing people where he was. It's not like he was slacking. I mean, he was an incredible healer in his hometown, and yet he would feel called to go forward and go into some of the hardest and most brutalized places in Africa, most disease-ridden. One of the things about Africa that it is the prevalence of the mosquito. You can make the case that a third of the people that have ever died in the world, all the people that have ever lived in the world, a third of them have died because of the mosquito. That's how That's how vicious communicable disease by mosquito is. Now, we're blessed to live in an age where a lot of that is kept at bay, and where we live. But it is, you'll still hear a couple of, every once in a while, like case of equine encephalitis that will get somebody from a mosquito. So he would go into the most brutalized places by disease and begin to set up his medical mission there. And all of his friends thought he was crazy. He said, "What are you doing? You're a great doctor. You're healing people. You're doing great work. You have a great life. You're things. How can you abandon all this and go into the jungles of Africa to care for people that you don't know and that barely know, that don't even know you? How can you give up to this to go care for this community and these people?" And that same amount of courage that he had to draw on as a boy, he showed to go forward in Africa. And he would become, and Dr. Albert Schweitzer would become famous for his work on the medical missionary field as an expression of his love of Jesus Christ. Friends, we are made in God's image. We are made in God's image. We are made in God's image. Do not be ashamed of those finer parts of yourself. Do not be ashamed of the beautiful instincts within you. Do not let the world and let the criticism of the world and let the critiques of the world harden your heart. Don't let the ways in which you've probably been brutalized and will be brutalized again for loving the world. One of the calls of us as people of faith are to be fools for Christ. To be fools for Christ. Not because God wants us to suffer, but because God wants us, as we love the world, to overcome the brutality of the world in our loving of it. And by virtue of that, overcome the brutality in our own hearts. There's another story I want to leave you with today, because that all sounds very nice, doesn't it? That all sounds very cleaned up and very sanitized. But our lives are actually more complicated than that. They're more that we're not Albert Schweitzer, are we? We're actually people who are in the trenches and who are in dealing with the world, and we're people with complicated things going on in our hearts and competing motivations and competing senses. And I want to suggest to you that stepping into our own image of God, our own image that God has laid down to us, that has implanted in us, the image of Christ that is within us, that is looking to be born out and to be lived out and to be incarnated in this world, right down to our fingertips and our fingernails, right down to the actions of our days, right down to the tips of our hair. That which we're called to live into being, that beauty, well, it actually doesn't have to be perfect, although we're being perfected. It doesn't have to be right, although we're getting closer to right all the time. And that the true journey is really about being brought towards that. This is a hard story I want to share with you, so I want to set it up a little bit. But it comes from the book With the Old Breed by Eugene Sledge. Eugene Sledge was a mortarman in World War II. He writes probably one of the most honest novels about what combat looked like and what life in combat through the islands, through Peleliu, through the island campaigns that the Marines fought through in a brutal way. We're at the we're celebrating the anniversary, we're honoring, we're noting the anniversary of these few weeks of the Iwo Jima campaign. And so I wanted to talk about this story. So Sledge was noticed that some of the Japanese that had been killed had these gold fillings, and it was the practice of some of the other Marines in what they called stripping the dead to actually take out these gold fillings and take those fillings back and keep them, and because it was gold, and they would eventually melt them down and take them as the spoils of war. And this is something that Sledge hadn't done yet, and he was about. So he saw one guy with a particularly big old grill of one corpse with a particularly big old grill of teeth of gold teeth, and he got out his K-bar and he got ready to go. Right then, the corpsman, a guy by the name of Doc Caswell, came up, and the doc was from Louisiana and had that old Louisiana drawl, and he says, "What you gonna do there, Sledgehammer?" And he says, "Oh, I thought I was gonna." He goes, "Oh, I think I'm gonna collect some gold teeth." And he says, "Don't do it." He says, "Well, why not, Doc?" He says, "You don't want to do that sort of thing." He says, He says, "What if your folks knew?" He says, "Well, my dad's a doctor. I think it'd probably be pretty interesting, actually. What do you think?" And so Sledge bent down to begin to take out the teeth out of the Japanese corpse, and he says, "No, Sledgehammer, the germs. Think about the germs. You gotta get germs from them." He said, "Germs? Well, I never thought of that." And so he stopped and looked and he says, "Germs? Well, all right." I says, "Well, I guess." He says, "Oh yeah, you gotta be careful of those germs." He says, "Yeah, I guess you gotta be careful of those germs." He says, "Well, I'll just take the epaulets off of his uniform and call it good then." He says, "Oh, he says that's a good idea. I guess that'd be safe." And so Doc Caswell kept him from that act of taking the gold teeth out of the Japanese that had been killed in combat in their midst. And Sledge would go back to reflect on this after the war. And what he realized about Doc Caswell was not that he was really worried about germs or that there was a particular infection going around from this. He was worried. He was a man, as the corpsman and as the medic, who had not yet lost his full humanity in the midst of combat, and that he had enough sensitivity that hadn't been crushed out of him by war, that he was actually just helping him try to maintain some of his by not engaging in some of the more gruesome practices of the war. Friends, I don't think salvation and I don't think our lives together rely on us getting it all right. I think it lies in the encouragement of each other, just on occasion, just as we can muster, just as we are, to not engage in the most gruesome and most callous of acts in our midst, to help to retain some of our own humanity, to retain some of our own image of God in the midst of our days and in the midst of our living. It takes courage. It takes sacrifice sometimes. But I think in the end, and well, I know in the end, the image of God will shine through, because it is truly who and what we are created to be. It is truly who and what that is coming to the fore in our being. And that if we can, even in the most grotesque of circumstances, simply hold one another to continue to stay out of the germs, the contagion of the hardness and the callousness and the brutality of the world. Don't be ashamed of the image of God that lives in you. Don't hide it from the world on the idea that it would be crushed or it would be broken or it would even be mocked. It might be, but it will not be destroyed. It will not let go of you, because there's who you are truly meant to be. All right, friends, that's my hope for you today. Peace and grace to you all, and we'll pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11.